She thought he was just a cab driver. So she got in, tired, broke, and holding back tears. But the man behind the wheel wasn't who she thought. He was a billionaire. And what he did next, it didn't just change her night. It changed her entire life. Welcome to Hearts and Billions, where the rich meet the broken, and one moment changes everything. Love, loss, redemption, all in one story. Subscribe to feel every heartbeat. Please kindly take me to 1,000 subscribers. It was raining lightly as Lena rushed down the street, holding her baby in one arm and a bag of groceries in the other. Her phone was dead. She had ordered a rideshare earlier, but with no way to track it now, she was panicking. She couldn't afford to be late for her night shift again. Then she saw it. A black SUV pulled up near the curb, shiny, expensive looking. She didn't care. She assumed it was her ride. She hurried over, opened the door without asking, and said breathlessly, "Thank God you're here. Please drive. I'm late, and they'll fire me." The man behind the wheel looked surprised for a moment. He was wearing a dark coat and looked well-dressed, too neat to be a normal cab driver. But instead of correcting her, he gave a tiny smile and said nothing. He simply started driving. Lena didn't even notice the strange silence. She was too busy calming her baby, apologizing for the mess, and muttering about how hard her life had become. She didn't know that the man behind the wheel was not a driver. He was Damien Cole, one of the richest men in the city. And yet, something about her made him keep driving. The city lights flickered through the car windows as they drove in silence. Lena let out a deep sigh, cradling her baby on her lap. The child had finally stopped crying, dozing off to the soft hum of the engine. Her clothes were damp from the rain, her shoes slightly muddy, and her grocery bag had tipped over on the floor, one bruised apple rolling under the seat. She glanced up, embarrassed. "Sorry about the mess," she muttered, brushing her wet hair from her face. "Rough night. I didn't mean to snap earlier. I've just been tired." The man nodded slightly, keeping his eyes on the road. He hadn't said a word since she got in, but he listened, really listened. She looked down at her baby's tiny fingers and let the words tumble out. "I used to work at a real office, you know, full-time. But then Mom got sick, and I couldn't afford the care. So I left work to take care of her. Then I got pregnant. And the father, he disappeared before the baby was even born." She gave a bitter laugh, half pain, half pride. "Now I clean houses during the day and stock shelves at night. No insurance, no breaks, no sleep. But I'm still standing. I have to be. For her." Damien gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. He didn't interrupt. Lena sighed again. "Sometimes I wonder if anyone up there's even watching, or if I'm just screaming into the void." She turned to him then, almost realizing for the first time that he hadn't spoken. "You must think I'm crazy, unloading all this on a stranger," she said with a weak smile. "Sorry, I just haven't had anyone to talk to in a long time." He finally spoke, his voice low, calm, and steady. "You don't sound crazy. You sound tired but strong." Lena blinked. His voice didn't sound like a driver's. It was smooth, educated, familiar somehow. But before she could think too much, the baby stirred, and she turned her attention back to her child. Damien glanced at her through the mirror. She didn't know who he was, didn't recognize the billionaire behind the wheel. But to him, she was unforgettable. They were almost halfway through the city now. The buildings grew older, more worn. Neon lights flickered above closed storefronts. Potholes rattled the SUV's wheels. It was clear this wasn't the part of town Damien Cole usually found himself in. But he stayed quiet. Not because he didn't want to talk, but because every word Lena said made the world outside blur a little more. She was still speaking, though more softly now, maybe because she finally felt safe. "Tonight was supposed to be my last shot," she said, eyes fixed on the baby sleeping in her arms. "The manager gave me one more chance after I missed last week. My mom had a fall. I couldn't leave her alone." She chuckled under her breath, but there was no joy in it, just exhaustion. "And, of course, daycare called today. They said if I don't pay by Friday, they'll drop us. How am I supposed to work if I can't even find someone to watch my baby?" She paused, staring out the window now. "I used to think I'd make something of my life. Go back to school, maybe open a small bakery. Nothing fancy. Just something mine, you know. But now I can't even afford flour half the time. Damien's jaw tightened. This woman had no idea who he was. To her, he was just a silent, kind-faced stranger behind the wheel. But to him, she was slowly peeling away something he'd forgotten. Real life. He lived in a penthouse above the clouds. He hadn't driven his own car in years. His days were packed with numbers, meetings, and people who only saw his money, not his humanity. But this moment with Lena, this unfiltered truth, was hitting him harder than any boardroom pitch ever had. He looked at her again. She wasn't asking for pity. She wasn't begging. She was just telling the truth, with the kind of strength that didn't show up in bank accounts. And for the first time in years, Damien felt something shift inside him. Maybe this ride wasn't random. Maybe it was exactly what he needed. The SUV finally slowed to a stop. They had reached a small, tired-looking apartment complex tucked between two empty lots. One of the streetlights flickered weakly above the entrance. The stairs leading up to the building were cracked and chipped, and a soggy flyer for a payday loan company flapped in the wind nearby. Lena looked up at the building and sighed. "This is us," she said quietly. "Thanks for getting us here." She shifted her baby in one arm, bent down to grab her groceries, and froze. There was no app notification, no payment screen, no ride ID, just a blank phone still dead in her pocket. Her brows furrowed. She turned to him slowly. "Wait, why didn't anything come up on my phone?" Damien stayed silent for a second, then smiled softly. "Because I'm not your driver." Lena's face went pale. "What?" He shook his head gently. "I was just parked, waiting for someone. You jumped in before I could say anything. And honestly, I didn't mind." Lena's mouth opened slightly. Her heart dropped. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I thought you were the lift. I just assumed with the car and everything." He held up a hand. "It's okay, really. You looked like you needed a ride. So I gave you one." Lena stood still, stunned, groceries in hand and cheeks burning with embarrassment. "I can't believe I mean, you're dressed like that. And this car." "Yeah," Damien smiled. "Most people don't get in without asking. You're a first." And for some reason she laughed. Not because it was funny, but because she was too tired to cry. "I can't believe this night," she said, her voice cracking. Damien stepped out of the car and walked around. Without a word, he picked up the spilled grocery bag and carried it toward the stairs. Then he looked back. "Let me help you take these up." Lena stared at him. "Why?" He met her eyes, calm, clear, gentle. "Because you look like you carry too much on your own." That moment, simple as it was, felt like the ground shifted beneath her feet. Nobody had said something that kind to her in years. And for the first time in a long time, she let someone help. The stairwell smelled faintly of damp concrete and old dust. The fluorescent hallway light flickered as Damien followed Lena up to the second floor, carrying her grocery bag like it weighed nothing. But for her, that bag wasn't just full of food. It was full of pride, struggle, a week's worth of carefully planned survival. As they reached the door, she juggled her baby with one hand and fumbled for her keys with the other. The door stuck a little before opening. "Sorry," she said, stepping inside. "The lock's been like that forever. I keep meaning to call someone, but..." Her voice trailed off. There was always something more urgent. The apartment was small, just one bedroom and a kitchenette, with a playpen squeezed into the living room. The couch had a tear in the fabric, and a folded towel acted as a changing mat. But it was clean, home, quiet. Damien looked around, taking it all in without judgment. She noticed. "You don't have to come in. I'm sure you've got better places to be." "I don't mind," he said gently. "I've been to a lot of places. Not many felt this surreal." That made her pause. Something about the way he said it. Like he meant it. She set the baby down and grabbed 2 mugs, filling them with instant coffee. "I don't have cream," she said. "Black is fine." They sat down, her on the couch, him in the mismatched dining chair. She sipped her coffee and looked over at him, brows drawn. "You're not like anyone I've met. And I still can't believe I got in your car thinking it was a lift." Damien gave a small chuckle. "Well, it was the best detour I've taken in a long time." She tilted her head, a little smile creeping up. "What do you even do?" He looked down at his cup, debating. "Then I build things, tech, software. Some people call me a businessman. Some call me worse." "Tech?" She laughed. "Like apps?" Something like that. She didn't press, and he didn't explain. She didn't need to know his bank account to feel the kindness in his presence. That was rare. Then after a quiet moment, he leaned forward slightly. "Can I ask you something?" She nodded. "If money wasn't a problem, what would you do?" The question stunned her. She blinked, confused. "What?" "If you didn't have to worry about bills, rent, diapers, food, what would you do with your life?" She looked away, swallowing hard. Her throat tightened. "I don't let myself think about stuff like that anymore. It hurts." "Try." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I used to dream about opening a bakery. A real one. With glass cases, warm lights, soft music. I used to bake with my mom before she got sick." He watched her face as she spoke, the way her eyes softened at the memory, the quiet ache behind her words. "You still can," he said. She scoffed. "On what? Hope and powdered sugar?" But he was serious. His voice dropped low, almost like a promise. "What if I told you I could help? A job, better childcare, a chance to reset." Her guard shot up instantly. She leaned back. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." He looked at her, really looked. "Because tonight I saw someone who's doing everything right and still losing. And I don't believe that's how it should be." She was quiet now. No more comebacks, no sarcasm, just silence. Because deep down, she wanted to believe him. But she'd been disappointed too many times before. So she whispered the truth. "Don't say that unless you mean it." He nodded. "I wouldn't be here if I didn't." The next morning, the city was still waking up. Outside Lena's window, kids ran for the school bus, and car horns filled the air. Inside her tiny apartment, sunlight spilled through the curtain as her baby babbled quietly in the playpen. Lena stood at the stove, flipping a pancake and humming softly. She hadn't felt this light in weeks. Something about last night had stuck with her. Not just the ride, but the way that stranger had looked at her, like she mattered. A soft knock came at the door. It was her neighbor, Mrs. Dolores from next door. She was holding a rolled-up newspaper and looked like she had just seen a ghost. "Lena," she said, wide-eyed. "You better sit down." Lena frowned, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Is everything okay?" The old woman shoved the newspaper into her hands. "Page 1. Lena slowly unrolled it, and there it was. Front and center, tech billionaire Damien Cole makes surprise. Appearance in the city, mystery woman and baby spotted in his car. Her breath caught. She stared at the photo beneath the headline. It was a grainy shot taken from across the street, but there was no mistaking it. It was her. Her and the baby, in the back of that SUV. And the man behind the wheel, the same man who carried her groceries, drank coffee at her kitchen table, and asked about her dreams. He wasn't just anyone. He was Damien Cole, the CEO, the billionaire, the man whose name was on half the tech apps in the country. Forbes, Wired, Fortune. She had read about him. Everyone had. Lena's knees gave way, and she sank slowly onto the couch. "Oh my God," she whispered. Mrs. Dolores stared at her like she'd won the lottery. "You didn't know." Lena shook her head, dazed. "I thought he was just being nice." The baby cooed from the playpen, unaware that his mother's entire reality had just changed. Lena clutched the newspaper, 100 thoughts crashing into her at once. Why hadn't he told her? Was this some kind of game? Or did he really mean what he said, that he wanted to help? Was she just a story? A photo op? A feel-good moment for the media? Or had he really seen her? Really heard her? She didn't know what to believe. Not yet. But one thing was certain. The man who drove her home last night was not a cab driver. He was a billionaire. And now the whole world knew. Lena couldn't focus. The newspaper still sat on the counter. But she hadn't touched it since that morning. Her hands shook every time she looked at it. All day, she kept expecting someone to knock. Maybe reporters. Maybe neighbors wanting gossip. Maybe Damien himself. But no one came. She paced the apartment, holding her baby against her chest. Her thoughts raced. Why didn't he tell me who he was? Was anything he said even real? Was I just a headline to him? And then, just after sunset, someone knocked. Not gently, not urgently, just knocked. She stood frozen. Another knock, this time softer, familiar. She opened the door slowly. There he was, Damien, in a simple grey sweater, not a suit. No bodyguards, no cameras, just him. Her heart jumped into her throat. "You're on the front page of the newspaper," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "Not how I wanted you to find out." She crossed her arms. "Why didn't you tell me?" He stepped closer carefully. "Because I wanted to hear your story without the noise, without the assumptions. Just you." She didn't say anything. Damien took a breath. "I meant everything I said last night, Lena. I wasn't playing a game. I didn't help you because of some PR stunt. I did it because I saw you." "You don't know me," she whispered. "I didn't," he said. "But I want to, and I want to help." "For real?" She narrowed her eyes. "Help how?" He reached into his coat pocket and handed her a folder. Inside was a job offer with full-time pay, benefits, free childcare, and a relocation package. Lena stared at it, stunned. Her hands shook again, but for a different reason this time. "I don't want your charity," she said, voice tight. "This isn't charity," he replied. "It's an investment in someone who's already stronger than most people I know, in a woman who's been doing everything alone and still didn't break." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I don't know if I can trust this." "You don't have to decide tonight," Damien said gently. "But let me drive you again. Just once, no headlines, no secrets, just us. And if by the end of that ride you still don't want anything to do with me, I'll leave. For good." Silence stretched between them. Lena looked down at her baby, then back at the man who had once been a stranger behind the wheel. And slowly, almost painfully, she nodded. "Okay, one more ride." It had been 3 months. 3 months since that second ride. 3 months since Lena handed her notice to the night shift manager, packed up her tiny apartment, and walked into a whole new life. Now she stood in the glass lobby of a bright, modern building. Her name was listed on the door, Lena Matthews, Community Outreach Director, the Cole Foundation. Her baby giggled in the on-site daycare just a floor below. Her mother now had access to proper treatment and in-home nurses. And Lena was finally breathing, not just surviving, living. She now helped other single mothers, people like her, get access to housing, jobs and real childcare. Every day she showed up to work, she brought her story with her, not with shame, but with strength. And through it all, Damien had stayed close. He never made grand speeches. He didn't flaunt his wealth. He just showed up, quietly, consistently. Sometimes it was over coffee, sometimes over early morning meetings, but always with respect. He saw her not as a project, but as a partner. And one evening, at a charity event she helped organize, Lena stood beside him as flashbulbs sparked across the room. She wore a soft green dress and held a mic in her hand, nervous but proud. "This foundation exists," she told the crowd, "because someone once gave me a ride, when I didn't even know I was lost." Damien's eyes never left her. After the applause faded, Lena turned to him. "You didn't just change my life," she whispered. "You gave it back to me." He smiled, his voice low. "No, you reminded me what life was for." Then quietly, he offered her his hand, not as a billionaire, not as a driver, but as a man who had finally found someone worth slowing down for. And as Lena took it, she realized something. Sometimes the ride you didn't ask for is the one that takes you home. Lena never forgot that night. Not because of the car, not because of the man who turned out to be a billionaire, but because, for the first time in a long time, someone saw her, really saw her, not as a single mother, not as a burden, not as a mistake, but as a woman with value, with dreams, with fight still left in her. And Damien, he thought he had everything. Wealth, power, a name the world respected. But that night, behind the wheel of his own car, he found something he didn't know he was missing. Purpose, connection, love. It didn't begin in a boardroom, or at a fundraiser, or on a red carpet. It began with a tired mother, in the rain, who got into the wrong car. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't the wrong car at all. Because sometimes the most beautiful stories start with a mistake that turns into a miracle. If this story touched your heart, don't scroll away just yet. Tell us in the comments, have you ever had a stranger change your life in the most unexpected way? Like the video, if you believe kindness still exists. And don't forget to subscribe to join us for more true-to-life stories that remind us what really matters. Because sometimes it's the smallest moments that lead to the biggest changes.